Hello and welcome to our Edge Citizen Science Symposium. My name is Annalisa Ventola. I'm a community manager for the SSB, and I'm also the chair of this symposium. Brian, very excited to have you here today. I understand, though, that you are going to be stepping in for Jim's talk because he could not make it today. And so why don't you go ahead and bring up your slide, and I'll let you go ahead and get started.
All right. So, hi. Obviously, I am Brian Lathe, and I am not Jim Horan. Jim sends his apologies ahead of time. He had some unavoidable family commitments that came up after he signed up for this. But luckily, what we're going to talk about today is something that Jim and I spent several years talking about before he even applied for this position. So luckily, I will not have to riff, and I'm fairly intimately aware of several of kind of the themes that we want to move JSE towards, because it's stuff that we spent a whole lot of hours on the phone talking about before Jim got the position. So without further ado, as a new theme for the Society for Scientific Exploration, we really want to focus on this idea of collaborative approaches. And we have this in several directions. And I do promise you a lot of this is motivated by the fact that we want to make sure that people are aware of and getting the 120 plus years of science that has been done in anomalistics and parapsychology. And for those of you who talk around with other groups of people, even mainstream scientists in many cases are ignorant of the fact that there's been multiple journals out there for years and years and years and years with researchers doing the kind of stuff that we all love to do, because you're listening to me. Sorry. But we have some themes here, and most of it is a push towards collaborative approaches. The first one is the use of diverse fields in collaboration. It has been our experience, as we have published a lot of articles in the last several years, that having people from different expertise fields helps in many ways, right? Because each field has different background theories and ideas. And as such, when you bring people together, we have yet to have an instance where working with a diverse body of experts hasn't ended up producing a better, well-rounded collaboration, a better quality product. At least we would think so. We also want to emphasize, and this one I think is very important, adversarial collaboration. As someone with a very strong background in the social sciences, particularly social psychology, group dynamics, persuasion, it sometimes very much bothers me to see that team skeptic and team believer aren't working together, right? Because we have to worry about our biases and belief, kind of creating a group think effect. I am a minority in the Ghost Gang, and that I do identify as a believer and very much have a robust personal spiritual practice, but that doesn't negate my obligation as a scientist. And I have found that by working with skeptics or working with believers together on projects, coming to that common ground of science, that the overall work is better. Less assumptions are placed in introductions and discussions. Less statements that can't be philosophically or empirically proven. Or biases or pet projects tend to get scrubbed a little bit because there are people from both sides of the table actively looking at what we're producing and saying, okay, is there evidence? Is there at least a good logical chain for us to make claims A, B, or C, right? And then, of course, our third angle is group and citizen science projects, which we're all taking kind of an advocacy with, and we're obviously presenting as a master topic today. We want to emphasize with the journal submissions that utilize group and citizen science, right? We want more people involved. And we're going to talk about this more in detail in a few minutes. The point is that we do not have the resources as an anomalistic community or a parapsychological community to really get the information out there. As I said earlier, a lot of people still don't know we exist. And as much as we can engage in social media marketing or talking to one or two people or occasionally collaborating, the more that we get out and create citizen science projects for lay people, for invested non-scientists, the more we are sharing a very wide and diverse body of academic research that I can't speak for you guys, but I'd like more people to know about and be utilizing. So we are, you know, in a nutshell, we are actively soliciting and promoting projects with the journal that involve participatory team science, either at, you know, the high level academic collaboration level, or where, you know, we're being research educators and taking on lay people groups and interested individuals who want to help us collect, in theory, larger sets of data, more broad sets of data. And, you know, in some cases, hopefully get away from just, you know, intro psychology, intro sociology 101 students that show up in universities, which, you know, we all know have their own, shall we say, cultural biases when it comes to the ability to generalize from those samples. Along the lines of collaborative approaches, we really want to emphasize as a new direction for the journal, not that it's not being done, but pushing this more so, leveraging popular science. You know, parapsychology and novelistics do not live in a science vacuum. And in that sense, we need to be sure that we're citing appropriate areas of social science and physics that may not be directly related to parapsychology, but are certainly tangentially related to parapsychology and anomalistics. You know, the idea that if we are studying ESP and there is, you know, relevant studies in trait theory or certain personality variables, well, we all know through common sense that there's large bodies of literature there, and we'd like to see more of that used. We think that using more mainstream studies and connecting our research as anomalists and parapsychologists to the mainstream data, right? Whether they believe in us or not, you know, I want to make it clear that if someone is studying, you know, the 5-factor model of personality, and if one of those personality traits has relevance to ESP or haunting experience or a poltergeist, it doesn't matter whether those researchers believe in psi or believe in haunting or not. If they did a good job as scientists, their findings could very well be relevant to what we're studying. So, you know, we want to do a push to reach out and use more of the mainstream science, because we are not isolated. We are a subfield of the social sciences, you know, accepted, rejected, or otherwise. We're a part of a larger science community. And so we really want to push those connections. And of course, you know, when we cite other mainstream researchers and social science researchers, and that becomes more prominent, when we, you know, occasionally publish in mainstream journals with those sources, that's leading more mainstream scientists to looking at what we're doing and citing us. You know, I can say from personal experience that many PhD psychologists and sociologists I've talked to over the years have no clue that this field has empirical data. And as such, you know, it's been a bit of a journey trying to educate individuals and saying, oh no, this, you know, in some cases, parapsychology and anomalistics is older than most of the, you know, sub branches of parapsychology or sociology. So again, we're not going to be biased pro or con. Good research is good research, and we want to celebrate and advocate that within the journal. In terms of collaborative approaches, we also want to make things a little bit easier for not only citizen scientists, but researchers in general. So we're emphasizing that research briefs with a shortened research citation requirement is available for everyone who wants to submit to the JSE. We want to use these briefs as an easy or less hard method for citizen science groups publishing their findings. But we also want to ease requirements for simple scientific replication. You know, we've all heard about the replication crisis. So we want to make sure there is a place in the journal for people simply doing a simple replication. You know, I looked at this study in 2009, and here I have replicated it. I don't need to go into the full, you know, 50 references and introduction. It's just a replication. Let's get it on the record. And we are very much behind that. So, of course, we want new projects and innovative projects, but we certainly are also welcoming small projects and replication projects in some ways to, be better than the mainstream and make sure that, replication is occurring with critical findings in the field. So, as a kind of a major theme, cumulative model building and theory formation. We really want to emphasize research and reviews that build on cumulative knowledge to devise or test theories. And this is also part that part of the reason we want to bridge the gap and bring adversarial collaboration and group projects into play. We need to be looking at the critiques. We need to be looking at the positives that people have for various theories of psi, hauntings, poltergeist, mediumship. And as good objective scientists, ask ourselves, well, what is the data showing us? What pieces are missing in these predictive chains? And how can we come together, regardless of belief systems, and get answers for those claims? Building bridges is a fairly big theme here. And I'm speaking as someone with, a lot of experience with how ideology, belief system, politics, affects the ways that we think and assume about the world around us. The idea, I think, and maybe naively, I hope not, that Jim and I have is that, we can use science, objective science, the method of science, which hopefully most of us agree upon, to be that middle ground. If nothing else, think of it as, two sports teams or two fans of sports teams, that in the field agree about the rules of the game. And can cheer on. One group may win, the other group may not win, but at the end of the day, if we all agree upon the rules of the game, the field as a whole, hopefully, gets further informed and we gain more knowledge, more understanding about how this phenomena occurs. In terms of trying to make the journal more accessible for lay people and the media, we are adding for all articles lay and media friendly summaries along with the abstracts. We thought about maybe taking this further, but for right now, the idea is we want to make sure that if someone's going to find the journal and use it, that there are easy to understand summaries, gists, if you will, of what a particular research article is offering, what its merits are, what a literature review is going to show us through a review of the literature. And we also have an implication and application requirement that we're adding to articles, so that authors in a nutshell can kind of say, hey, here's the main theme of what this research says. Here is the applications or benefits of these findings, and how you as a normal lay person or as someone interested in science could practically use these reviews or these findings. And then finally, without hopefully getting on too much of a soapbox, furthering the empirical assessment of edge science topics. And here's where I'll ramble a little bit, in the sense that we really want to emphasize with the journal that we're going to practice true scientific neutrality. Popular does not make correct, unfortunately. Now, again, as a social scientist, I'm well aware that in our mainstream culture, popularity does make correct, right? In fact, one of the key findings in sociology is this idea of the Thomas theorem. That which is perceived to be true will be true in its consequences. And essentially what that means is that if enough people agree that something is true, facts and data become fundamentally irrelevant in terms of those individuals holding that belief and, in fact, acting upon that belief. Most of you guys are familiar with confirmation bias, and we've all leveraged it at different groups, but the truth is it is a universal human tendency. We all have our beliefs and our biases that can theoretically influence how we not only do science, but interpret science. So Jim and I feel it's best for the journal to take a true neutral stance. We are not going to advocate or not advocate what is religiously, socially, politically popular or unpopular. Instead, we're going to hold to the true dictates of science and the underlying philosophies of science, which says data is king, right? Evidence is king. Whether or not something is or is not culturally acceptable, obviously within limits, right? Is something we're not so worried about. If someone can make a good case with solid citations, solid evidence, and solid data, we're open to reviewing that kind of paper. Um, Again, in this world where I think a lot of psychological charging has occurred in a lot of different domains, we want to remind and be the journal that says that, look, science is an arbiter, not an advocate. Right? That's the one thing about science, as opposed to belief, that everyone here hopefully would agree upon, which is we're supposed to have evidence. We're supposed to be able to make our claims based on direct or indirect observations, and we're supposed to rely on that data and evidence, regardless of whether or not it aligns with or does not align with what is currently believed in academic culture or in popular culture. So, kind of as a heads up to anyone listening today, we are open to any type of, topic that you want to cover. If I can say personally that if you want to do a deep dive into the chupacabra and you have the data and the literature to do it, I would love to read and review that article. And it's pretty much the same thing with any of these topics. So, part of our general message is just to let everyone know that we're going to be scientists and we're going to practice the dictates of science with regards to the journal. Again, whatever your topic is or whatever your advocacy is, we are great with, so long as the data and the evidence, right, is appropriately presented.
So, Brian, I know that what you and Jim have been doing on the topic of hauntings, you've been calling it adversarial collaboration. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And I know too that you held a meeting at the Sayagora held by the Parapsychological Association on that topic. And I'm curious if along the way you found, like, are there other areas in edge science that you think are particularly amenable to this adversarial approach?
I think all of the edge science areas are amenable to this type of approach. If we're not dealing with dogmatists in our groups, and what I mean by that is, kind of silly to be a scientist if you absolutely know in your heart absolutely the answers to everything, right? Which is kind of how belief works. But when we're dealing with skeptics, aka people who are doubting and want to control for confounds, I can't think of a single topic, no matter how much I love it or not love it, that isn't bettered by people being critical within your own group. We've all been through graduate school. We've all been through the what might border on verbal abuse and neglect that occurs through that process of graduate school. We've all gone through reviews of literature. We've all gone through peer review. Criticism is part of this job. Criticism is inherent in part of this job. And I would even go so far to say that if we don't have that, we don't have good science. So, and please don't mistake what I'm saying. Being on the other side of the fence, I've given it back as much as I've given. If anyone was present for Jim and I's debate, we got pretty sassy for about 30 or 40 minutes. Um, but again, that's the point. We understand we come from different views, but we agree upon the science, right? So it comes down to we can all agree on methods. We can all agree on research design. We can all come together to answer how should this be measured. And in that case, I always want people that are naysayers and critical thinkers, because that just means we're controlling for more confounds and we're controlling and designing, in theory, a better experiment.
Okay. We have a couple of raised hands. Oh, quite a few. We we've got one from the SSC president, and another from one of our symposia speakers, and another SSC member. And we've got plenty of these time for these questions. So I'm just gonna start down the row. So
Okay,
let's start.
this sounds
Huh?
like I might be in trouble. It sounds like
You,
I got
you
like,
might be. The president is lined up to talk to you. So
okay, well, here we go.
I'm not going to make you wait for it any longer.
Okay.
Here's Bill.
A clarification question. You're defaulting to science, and we can all agree on methods, and we're playing in the same sandbox. I'm paraphrasing, and we agree to the rules. I'm wondering about an articulation of those methods that would be in and would be out. And so some of the assumptions of methodology, depending on the circumstance, for example, in experimentation, among the assumptions of experimentation is locality. So you have this group and you have that group, and one is a control, we randomized, controlled, et cetera, et cetera. What if there's the possibility of non-locality, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say some people would suggest is possible. Now, what does that do to the methodology of, for example, the gold standard, placebo, double blind, et cetera, et cetera. So I've done some studies in placebos, and what I find is a suggestion that placebos are not, in fact, psychological, or certainly not solely psychological, but rather they're a resonant bonding of spatially separate groups. And the implication for methods is kind of profound with that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm babbling too much. I'll sign off and just hear how you respond to that.
No, Bill, I've read a fair amount of your work, and I'm a fan for what it's worth. And thank you for
that doesn't speak highly of you, but go ahead.
Well, okay, I'm gonna. You're right. You caught a very important. You caught a very important subject, and let me start with my personal philosophy. Right, this is not representing the journal or anyone else. Yeah. Science is a good method. It's not a perfect method. There are no perfect methods.
Right.
And so when people like you are dealing with phenomena that are highly difficult to handle, you do the best methods that you can figure out how to do.
Yeah.
So when I'm saying, come together in the best method possible, I'm not an absolutist about science. I don't claim that it has all answers for all things and it's a perfect measurement system. The very philosophy of science shows that it is not, and it started that way. So, we're in some ways dealing with challenges covering, remote healing, non-local sort of ESP effects that really will challenge experimental design. Yeah. And so my answer is much kinder than what maybe some of the pseudo skeptics would say, because they put out this image of, if you don't have this perfect airtight ironclad 19 study in a row design, to which in real life we all know very few people can do. We do the best we can with the tightest controls and the tightest methods we can come up with, yeah, with an acceptance that we may have to deal with some confounds. How can we not deal with some confounds with some of this stuff?
Yeah.
So no, thank you for bringing that out, Bill, because you're right. It's more of a best method that we can figure out. But I might also say, I also want to make it clear, because I've seen in a couple of mainstream journals lately, at least 2 articles that were published that were, had 4 or 5 PhDs in them, got past peer review, but were frankly fraudulent. They were fraudulent because they weren't reporting their effect sizes. They were, claiming some massive effect in the population when I looked at their numbers, and you're looking at a 1% to 2% effect. So I do think we just have to be honest about what we find. Yeah. And that non-significance is also fine, right? If we test it and we rule it out and it doesn't work, great. That's something that someone else doesn't have to worry about.
Yep, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill. I'm going to pass the mic now to Beatrice, who's incidentally speaking next as well.
How is it working? Oh no, it's working. Hello.
Hi, Beatrice.
Very nice talk. I have a question. So I'm an astronomer, and when during my experience as an astronomer, and when I've been doing the research, I've noticed that how likely that a paper gets accepted to a journal the function is kind of not entirely intuitive. So let's say if you work on a hot topic and you get a negative result, it's very likely that you'll get a rejection from the journal or from the referee that says that no, there is nothing contributed. You're not contributing to knowledge with this negative result. Not interesting. Rejection. Yeah. So you work on this hot topic. It is accepted mainstream topic, and simply you get it rejected. Okay, so let's say now you have done that, and now you do the opposite. Take the opposite case. You find some very peculiar topic related to anomalies. And it can be anomalies either that are very popular in the media. Let's say you look for aliens, or you look for some other type of anomaly. But here you start to get a positive result, which is seem to be a even bigger sin. Because then again, the editor I might not even send it to a referee. You get again reject. They'll say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and no matter how much you built it before, you will not even get to the review stage.
Let's deal with that statement you just said, and then we'll backtrack. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence is a massive pet peeve statement of mine because it is entirely culturally derived. It has no empirical or scientific basis. It translates to that which is not culturally popular requires extra evidence, which is a complete violation of a person's knowledge of science. I can say with 90% certainty, Jim and I have talked about this at length. We don't care if it's a hot topic. We care about the evidence. So if you don't get the popular finding, good, let's publish that, right? If you do get the popular finding, good, let's publish that too. Astronomy, astrology, cryptozoology, everything is welcome. Just bring your chops, right? Bring your references, bring your data, make it clean and make the best case you can. And we want to avoid that sort of bias and politic in this journal.
Is there some way how one can, like, when we interact with the other with mainstream scientists in mainstream journals, how we can counteract this phenomenon or increase the awareness of it? I'm wondering.
Well, as a social psychologist, my answer is probably not, because one of the truths about human behavior and culture in small groups and in groupthink groups is that once a person decides a belief is true, they naturally become resistant to changing it. And of course, there's always, self-esteem, ego, contextual rewards, punishments that all go into a group of people behaving and believing in the way that they believe. So when an outsider comes and pokes that, right or otherwise, with a good body of evidence or otherwise, and obviously I'm describing something we've all probably been through 100 times. I'm the negative Nancy that goes, well, the data shows us consistently you're not changing their belief. So unfortunately, the short answer is when we do mainstream, we kind of have to suffer through the political process. We're trying to remove as much as possible that political process with the JSE. Not that there was a political process previously. We're just talking about kind of our perspective about it now that we have just now gotten the ropes and trying to figure everything out. Is that comforting at all?
Yes, that's very comforting. I think it gives me some hope.
Thank you for your question, Beatrice. I'm going to go to the Q&A box, and then we'll come back to the raised hands.
No, I don't want to do the Q&A box.
Really?
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to be contrary.
Because I figured maybe you looked at it and made a firm decision, but here we go.
No, I haven't on purpose.
Okay. So this question comes from Robert Schutz. It says, it's great that you're encouraging more involvement with citizen science, but some of the greatest innovations in science come from individuals looking at data in different ways. How do you trade this issue off?
I don't think that, I have personally created some mathematical techniques back when I was doing, EMF studies with haunt phenomena. I am fine with new techniques. I think Jim would be fine with new techniques. I think all of our staff would. Just, make sure that they're appropriately documented. Again, going back to Bill's conversation, this myth that is out there that somehow one study is going to be so perfectly defined. Oh, no, we put 4 in one study. It's science is cumulative. So we are honest about what we can and can't control. We're honest about the strengths and limits of the research processes that we're using, including the mathematical processes we're using. We're fine with all of that. New and innovative data analysis, if you can demonstrate that it works, or new or innovative methods in assessing experiences or whatever your field is, yeah, go for it, and would love to see it. I think method innovation is something we should all be working on.
Okay. Hold on. I lost control of. There we go. All right, we're back. Okay, so we do have one more raised hand, and that is from William Beatty. So I'm going to hand him the mic. Hello.
It turned me off again. There we go. This is just an aside. Every so often I'll do lit search for JSE papers and find nada. It just appeared on Google Scholar. Journal of Scientific Exploration appears on Google Scholar because for decades nobody believes anything I say, because if I ref a JSE paper, it doesn't exist. You'd have to subscribe to the JSE or something. Now it's appearing on Google Scholar. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, I'm gonna take credit for that. I had a look at that. No, I did, and it turns out that if you go and look at Google Scholar, there's a tiny little section where they tell you how you can get their crawlers to crawl your content, and what it is that you have to use certain types of sites. It so happened that one of those types of sites is an OJS site, or Open Journal Systems. So happens that the JSC was already using one of those sites, but had actually had locked the articles. It was open access, so you could become get a free membership and look at the articles. But the act of locking it was preventing the crawlers from crawling the information. So it was actually really quite simple. Just unlock all that stuff. Don't have any barriers, even if they're free registration, no barriers to the content, and then very quickly, it sounds like Google.
There has been an ongoing issue for decades now about what, to pull some philosophy, what Foucault might recall techne or boundary work when it comes to science, right? It's not just our field. Most lay people don't have access to peer-reviewed journal articles. It's gotten a lot better in the last 15 years. And I'm very happy that JSE is open access now. It's my hope, maybe, and I have no idea the money and process involved with all that, so I don't want to put anything in anybody's mouth. But I hope all of the parapsych and anomalistic journals eventually get to open access. Because, again, we can't criticize people for not knowing the science if we don't have the availability of the science for them. So I'm with you, William.
My original question was with extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This was actually a dishonest ploy by JREF, PsyCop, CSI, maybe from 30 years ago, because they're the only ones who get to decide whether something is extraordinary or not. And I've been discussing it, fighting with the nastiest skeptics imaginable. Extraordinary claims require good, solid evidence.
Yeah.
Nothing about being extraordinary, not just good, solid evidence so that you can cross-check or do your own replications or whatever. This thing about it being extraordinary is totally a matter of opinion and is pure pseudoscience. If they're you say it's scientific, whether it's extraordinary enough or not, no, that's pseudoscience, which JREF is famous for using pseudoscience to defeat anything they don't like.
Well, I agree with you 100%. But I would also say that I've seen rhetoric from both sides. I've seen rhetoric, not evidence and logic. I've seen rhetoric.
Yeah.
And as a personal note, not speaking for the journal or Jim, I am very much an anti-rhetoric person when it comes to science. If you can't back it up and you can't make a logical claim or can't at least make a clear case that A therefore B is there, then don't make it and don't resort to rhetoric because you can't make your case. I think sometimes I want to reach out to everybody and be like, it's okay that you believe stuff. It's okay that everybody does believe stuff. We all trust our kindergarten, that our kindergarten teachers told us the truth. That's faith, right? She showed us pictures in a book. We're like, well, must be true. And everyone takes stuff for granted, and that's okay. We just can't confuse our beliefs with stuff that has evidence and data. They're not the same thing.
And Brian, thank you for presenting Jim's slides. You did a fantastic job, and I'm also very much looking forward to what the next few issues of the JSC are going to look like.
I can promise you, without giving away secrets, there's going to be some sassiness. We've got a lot of stuff coming in. So
fantastic. All right, thank you, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.